And at number 4, we have the Way of the Four Elements Monk. This is a monk subclass which is supposed to specialize in using your key points in order to manipulate and control the elements in the form of spells and other various features. The way this works is at 3rd level, you gain the Disciple of the Elements feature, which allows you to learn an Elemental Disciple when you first learn this feature, another one at 6th, 11th, and 17th level. Elemental Disciple basically allows you to learn how to cast spells or perform different abilities by spending key points in order to do so. Some of these spells and abilities are locked behind level, and you're limited to how many key points you're allowed to spend at one time when casting a spell, as dictated by the table. Now, let's go over the different kinds of spells and abilities you can learn by taking Elemental Disciples. Starting at 3rd level, you have a few special abilities to choose from. Elemental Attunement you learn for free without needing to pick a discipline, and allows you to use an action in order to control the elemental forces within 30 feet of you, and can cause one of 4 effects to occur, such as creating a harmless sensory effect out of air, earth, fire, or water, snuffing out a candle, torch, or small campfire, chilling or warming up 1 pound of non-living material for up to 1 hour, or shape 1 cubic foot of earth, fire, water, or mist into a crude form for 1 minute. Basically, this works like the Prestidigitation cantrip, which has similar effects, only more flavorful to fit the 4 elements. Shape the Flowing River allows you to spend 1 key point in order to manipulate an area of ice or water within 120 feet of yourself. The ice can't be larger than 30 feet on one side, and can basically be molded however you want, so long as you don't exceed half the area's largest dimension, and as long as you don't try to trap or injure a creature in that area either. Unbroken Air is a discipline that allows you to spend 2 key points in order to force a straight saving throw against a creature that's in 30 feet of you, dealing 3d10 bludgeoning damage for the initial hit, and additional 1d10 bludgeoning damage per key point spent, effectively making this attack deal a total of 5d10 bludgeoning damage. You can also knock back a creature up to 20 feet away and make them fall prone if they fail their saving throw. However, they'll only take half damage and not be knocked away if they do manage to succeed their saving throw. Water Whip does the opposite of Unbroken Air, instead opting for a choice between pulling your target up to 20 feet towards you or making them fall prone if they fail a dexterity saving throw, while maintaining the same amount of damage as the aforementioned discipline. Meanwhile, Fangs of the Fire Snake essentially allows you to do a mini smite with all of your attacks on your turn whenever you take the attack action by causing tendrils of flame to stretch out for your fist and feet. It costs 1 key point to activate these tendrils and increases the reach of your unarmed strikes by 10 feet for both the action and any attacks you make for the rest of the turn. Hits with this attack deal fire damage instead of bludgeoning, and you can spend 1 key point every time you land an attack to deal an extra 1d10 fire damage with your fists. This is by far the most useful out of the special abilities you can learn, as it's just a flat damage increase. Just be wary of creatures that resist or have immunity to fire damage, which is quite a lot of them. As for spells that you can learn when learning a discipline, there are 3 first level spells which all require you to spend 2 key points in order to cast them, starting at 5th level, which can be upcasted by spending 1 key point per level upcast to a maximum of key points you're allowed to use for your spell, which is listed on the table for the subclass. First, you have Fist of Four Thunders, which grants you the ability to cast Thunderwave. Second, you have Rush of the Gale Spirits, which allows you to cast Gust of Wind. And thirdly, you have Sweeping Cinder Strike, which allows you to cast Burning Hands. While these spells are okay, they're not really worth using as a monk. Thunderwave and Gust of Wind are both decent knockback spells and can help make room for you if you need to push or move something off of a high ground. However, Burning Hands is just a terrible spell to use for a monk in general. It deals 3d6 fire damage to creatures in a 15-foot cone, which seems pretty good for dealing with multiple targets. But, because in most cases, you're better off just making a bunch of attacks with your fire tendrils from the Fangs of the Fire Snake discipline. But for the biggest reason these spells aren't great for monks is the fact that they require creatures to make saving throws, which might sound weird, but let me explain. You see, in D&D, you have full casters like wizards and sorcerers, half casters like rangers and paladins, and third casters like arcane trickster rogues and eldritch knight fighters. Full casters tend to prefer focusing on getting the most use out of their spells, and so will commonly prioritize maximizing their spellcasting stat in order to get their spell attack rolls and spell DCs as high as possible to be able to capitalize on casting a slow or deal full damage from a fireball. Meanwhile, half-casters and third-casters kind of use spells as a secondary resource that they could use to supplement their main attacks using weapons and other class features. For this reason, a paladin might prioritize strength over the charisma, their spellcasting stat, in order to be able to maximize their accuracy with their greatsword, then burning spell slots to fuel their divine smite feature. This goes even deeper with arcane trickster rogues and eldritch knight fighters due to these subclasses wanting to prioritize other stats over a higher intelligence stat in order to make use of some of the wizard spells they get to learn. What this does is encourages half-casters and third-casters to pick spells that don't require a spell attack roll or saving throw, since these being lower means these spells are less accurate. So spells like Spike Growth, Bless, Invisibility, or Magic Missile might be preferred over something like Entangle, Bane, Charm Person, or Scorching Ray, simply because you don't need to do anything other than cast a spell to gain their benefit. So, moving back to monks, they kind of run into the same situation. They want to have high strength or dexterity for their attack rolls, AC, and deflect missiles features that also lets them add the dexterity modifier to damage reduction, as well as your evasion feature, which is excellent for surviving things that force you to make a dexterity saving throw, reducing all damage from that score to 0 upon a success, while having the damage on a failure. Monks also need good wisdom for their unarmored defense feature, and saving throw DC for things like stunning strike and other abilities that they might learn. So, just like a half-caster, you're already going to prioritize your main attack and survivability before your wisdom in most cases. But if you take a look at the full list of spells and abilities you can take throughout your time as a 4 Elements monk, you'll notice that pretty much every one of them requires a saving throw with only a few exceptions. And those few exceptions you have aren't very great either, other than Fangs of the Fire Snake, or maybe being able to cast the Fly spell on yourself just for the extra mobility it can grant. And out of all the spells that do have saving throws attached to them, Cone of Cold, Fireball, and Shatter are easily the best picks, even though you would learn them much later down the line than most other casters do. Another problem with the 4 Elements monks has its lack of resources in order to be able to continuously cast many of these spells over the course of a day. Between Stunning Strike, Flurry of Blows, and other monk features that require them to spend key points on, there are just too few of them to be able to cast your spells more than a couple of times per rest. While you could spam Fireball 5 times at 20th level, that's all you'll really be able to do until you rest up to restore your missing key points. But at that point, you might just be better off rolling a Wizard or Sorcerer if you wanted to spam Fireball. Also, another downside is the fact that when you cast any of these spells or use most of these special abilities like Unbroken Air or Water Whip, you actually do have to cast the spell. They aren't part of your attack action or anything, which means that you can't follow up with a Flurry of Blows or do anything else except spend a key point to dodge, disengage, or take the dash action. And if you're wondering why we haven't gone over the other subclass features it learns, like the others on this list, well, that's all they really get. Just one extra elemental discipline at each subclass level. You can even replace one of the disciplines you know if you're not feeling like something you picked is pulling its weight. Overall, the heavy resource management mixed with the steep cost of the spells and abilities you're able to learn with the subclass makes Way of the 4 Elements a very terrible class to play. Since even the spells lack variety due to the fact you kind of have to take the hard-hitting options to even be effective in the first place, which all amounts to the reason why this subclass places so high on this list. And at number 3, we have the Banneret Fighter, which is also referred to as the Purple Dragon Knight subclass. This fighter subclass basically focuses on granting your allies some of the same features you would normally get as a fighter, but with less effectiveness than the actual feature. For example, let's take a look at the Purple Dragon Knight's 3rd level feature, Rallying Cry. This feature allows you to choose up to 3 allied creatures that can see or hear you, and are within 60 feet of you, to restore hit points equal to your fighter level whenever you use your 2nd wind feature. A bonus action feature you get at 1st level and restores hit points equal to 1d10 plus your fighter level. Another instance where you get to share your fighter features happens at 10th level, where you gain the Inspiring Surge feature, allowing you to choose 1 allied creature within 60 feet of you, 2 allies at 18th level, to use their reaction to make 1 melee or ranged attack whenever you use Action Surge, a feature you learn at 2nd level and allows you to take any action you want a 2nd time on your turn. And for the last feature, we have Bulwark at level 15, which lets you share your Indomitable feature to an ally within 60 feet of you whenever you use it yourself. Normally, Indomitable allows you to reroll any saving throw that you fail and then use the new roll. However, Bulwark only allows you to share your Indomitable feature whenever you failed Intelligence, Wisdom, or Charisma saving throws specifically. Now, the benefit of all these features is definitely the fact that their effects kind of feel natural and flows really well with the benefits that come from using your day-to-day class features as you normally would. However, the problem with the Purple Dragon Knight comes from the fact that these extra benefits don't really amount to much, and are kind of boring in general. You don't really get anything unique like Echo Knights or Eldritch Knights, and the added benefits from your subclass features feel too underwhelming for what they're meant to do. Overall, the subclass has a really cool concept attached to it, but just like the Battle Rager Barbarian, the Purple Dragon Knight feels undertuned in terms of how strong its effects are. In fact, the only thing Purple Dragon Knight even has going for it is its 7th level feature, which we haven't even talked about yet, Royal Envoy. And all that does is give you proficiency and expertise on persuasion checks. As for everything else, if the shared features part of the subclass was a bit stronger than what it is right now, maybe allowing Inspiring Surge to also allow a select creature to take the attack or cast action as a reaction instead, it might feel much better to play. But as it stands now, the Purple Dragon Knight gets to sit the number 3 spot on this list. And at number 2, we have the Undying Warlock subclass. Not to be confused with the much better looking and more functional subclass, the Undead Warlock. The Undying Warlock's whole theme revolves around the idea of everlasting life, which sounds amazing at first, until you learn about the subclass features you obtain as an Undying Warlock. You can pick this subclass as soon as first level, and it grants you access to an expanded spell list for you to choose from when picking Warlock spells. These spells aren't that good, other than maybe Contagion and Silence, but are also not super terrible. Additionally, you also gain the Among the Dead feature, which teaches you the Spare the Dying cantrip for free, gives you advantage on saving throws against any disease in the game, and provides you the benefits of the Sanctuary spell whenever you're facing undead creatures, where if it tries to harm you with an attack or harmful spell, it must succeed a Wisdom saving throw or be forced to either choose another target for the attack or waste it altogether by doing nothing with it. This doesn't apply to area of effect spells like Fireball or Shatter, and if the undead creature successfully makes their Wisdom save, they're immune to any further effects of this feature for the next 24 hours. This makes for a really solid defense option when fighting undead creatures. However, there is one additional caveat that makes this feature almost useless. If you target an undead creature with an attack or harmful spell, then the creature also gains immunity from this effect for 24 hours, which can be detrimental if you want to play on the offensive. You would have to play very defensively around undead creatures if you want this part of the feature to be turned on as much as possible, which is kind of counterintuitive to how Warlocks want to play. Usually, they'd want to sit back and cast Eldritch Blast or throw a couple of AoE spells or debuffs at enemies, meaning that, realistically, you'd only really have this effect up during the first round of combat, where creatures might try to attack you before you attack them. Moving on to your 6th level feature, you gain the ability Defy Death, which allows you to regain hit points equal to 1d8 plus your Constitution modifier whenever you either succeed a death saving throw or stabilize someone using Spare the Dying. This can only be done once per long rest, and can be kind of risky to pull off for your allies since Spare the Dying normally requires a range of touch in order to instantly stabilize the creatures whose hit points are at 0. So if your frontline fighter goes down to a powerful attack, the last thing you want to do is run up to them to try and pick them up with Spare the Dying, since you'd be putting yourself in danger as well. And because this can only be done once per long rest, you better hope that the next attack doesn't just knock you out or your fighter back down again. In fact, this entire feature is pretty bad because you can just have your Bard or Cleric cast Healing Word in order to achieve the same effect. The only difference is that this effect happens automatically when you yourself succeed on a death saving throw. Even if you were to make Defy Death once per short rest, this feature wouldn't really be good to use, since it's really just a glorified Cure Wounds that only works when someone is already dying. Undead Nature is a feature you learn at 10th level, and completely strips away your need to eat, drink, breathe, or sleep. In addition to that, the rate at which you age is now slower, as for every 10 years that pass, your body only ages 1 year. You're also immune to age-altering effects through magic. This feature is purely for flavor and roleplay purposes, but for a 10th level feature, it may as well not even exist. Honestly, this feature just feels like it should have been included at first level when you first take up the subclass. And if you're a damper or another race that could forego eating, sleeping, and breathing, then half of this feature is effectively useless to you. And at 14th level, you get the incredible Indestructible Life feature, which lets you restore hit points equal to 1d8 plus your Warlock level once per long or short rest, as well as reattach severed limbs you might have lost. This is basically just a glorified second wind feature that fighters get to have from the beginning of their lifespan, except slightly weaker since second wind uses a d10 while Indestructible Life uses a d8. Overall, Undying Warlock has too many flaws and all of its subclass features are fundamentally useless or clash heavily with the Warlock playstyle. And everything it learns are just things that other subclasses can do better, which is why this subclass is so high on this list. But to put this into perspective before moving on, let's take a look at what the Grave Domain Cleric can do. At first level, they immediately learn Spare the Dying cantrip with a buffed 30-foot range instead of the normal range of touch. And in addition to that, whenever they use a healing spell to heal a creature that's at 0 hit points, they restore the maximum amount of hit points for each die rolled instead of rolling for them. Both of these combined basically do what Undying Warlocks want to do, but much better, since Spare the Dying being range is actually pretty useful even if you already have someone with Healing Word, as you'd still be able to stabilize someone with only a cantrip at a safer distance. And like it was said before, Indestructible Life is just a worse second win, although reattaching fallen limbs is admittedly neat flavor-wise. And finishing off this list at the number 1 spot is the Knowledge Domain Cleric. This subclass is all about obtaining knowledge and either sharing it to libraries or universities, or hoarding it all for yourself, or whatever you want to do with the knowledge you obtain. When taking this subclass at first level, you gain access to some extra spells that count as cleric spells for you, and gain the Blessings of Knowledge feature, which allows you to learn 2 languages of your choice and 2 proficiencies chosen with either arcane, history, nature, or religion. While you're proficient in these 2 skills, you effectively have expertise in them, allowing you to double your proficiency bonus when using them. At 2nd level, you gain the Channel Divinity feature called Knowledge of Ages, which allows you to use your action to become proficient in one skill or tool for the next 10 minutes after using it. And you gain another channel divinity option at 6th level called Read Thoughts, which allows you to do exactly that. As an action, you select one creature you can see within 60 feet of yourself and force them to make a wisdom saving throw. If they fail, you gain the ability to read the creature's surface thoughts for 1 minute, similar to the spell Detect Thoughts, as long as the creature remains within 60 feet of you. During that 1 minute interval, however, you can cast the suggestion spell on that creature without expending any spell slots, and that creature automatically fails its saving throw against the spell. This is admittedly a pretty strong feature, as suggestion is already a good spell on its own, since you can influence the action to someone you might not want to deal with by telling a guard to make sure his family's okay and spend more time with them. All Read Thoughts really does is reinforce an idea you might use for the spell, which might make it easier for the creature to follow whatever you're suggesting. If a guard is worried about his lost dog wandering around, you might be able to use that to feign a situation where you might have seen a dog at a certain part of the city, making it more likely the guard might take your suggestion to look for his lost dog while your party slips into the building unhindered. Upon reaching 8th level, you gain Potent Spellcasting, which lets you add your Wisdom modifier to the damage of your Cleric cantrips. And at 17th level, you gain the Visions of the Past feature. This feature allows you to spend a number of minutes equal to your Wisdom score in order to call up visions of the past to either an object you're holding or an area that you find yourself in. You must concentrate during this time as if concentrated on a spell, and can only use this feature once per short or long rest. Doing this while holding an object gives you information about how its previous owner acquired or lost the object, as well as the most recent significant event involving that object and the owner. You may also spend an additional minute to learn more about any recent owners that may have come into contact with the object within a number of days equal to your Wisdom score. Meanwhile, reading an area, such as a room or tunnel, will yield visions of significant events within a number of days equal to your Wisdom score, starting with the most recent events. These events might involve battles, murders, funerals, or other related events filled with powerful emotions, although some might feel more mundane, but important to you nonetheless. The main thing that makes this class the worst class in the game is the fact that you don't really get anything worth using until 6th level. While gaining proficiency with more skills is definitely nice, rogues and bards tend to be the go-to class when it comes to being really good with skill checks. And rogues just get more of them overall. Meanwhile, Read Thoughts only exist to set you up for suggestion, in which case you might be better off just casting suggestion, if you're okay with using a spell slot for it and cutting out the middleman, since both require a wisdom saving throw anyway. Potent spellcasting is just something that most other clerics get anyway, while their 17th level feature is strictly for role-playing purposes and flavor. However, it does have one of the best world-building potentials, as it might help create a timeline of events regarding how an item or an area got into the state it was found in. But overall, none of these features really help when it comes to combat scenarios, other than Potent Spellcasting and maybe Read Thoughts. But that not only costs an action to use, but you would still need to spend another action actually casting suggestion in the first place. So you may as well just cast the spell on its own. And if you're using Read Thoughts just to know what someone is thinking, you can just cast Detect Thoughts instead, and not have to worry about them making a saving throw unless you want to pry further for more information. Which is unfortunately not an option, since Detect Thoughts is not a cleric spell, and isn't included in your bonus spells for taking the subclass. Knowledge clerics suffer the most out of the previous subclasses, because they have nothing that helps them in combat other than a feature other clerics can get at the same level, and its flavor and RP uses don't bring anything to the table. In fact, its extra skill proficiencies are really the only thing worth having, as you gain Legend Lore as a bonus spell, which kind of works similarly to Visions of the Past, but arguably better, since the information provided by the spell extends to specific names as well. The only limitation to Legend Lore is that whatever you name has to have legendary significance, or you just don't learn anything about it. But in most cases, players would only probably use Legend Lore in the same places that they would use Visions of the Past, unless you're investigating a more generic area or object, in which case it would be a very useful feature if it wasn't acquired at such a high level. At the end of the day though, Knowledge Domain clerics don't really have anything going for them, other than extra skills which can be covered by taking other subclasses that are much more functional and flow better. Alright, and that's the list. Do you think we missed any other subclasses that should be on this list instead? Or maybe have ideas for future top 10s just like this one? If so, we'd love to hear about them down in the comments below. Take care, and thanks for watching.